back and we'll look at some specific strategies that people have tried. Now, Retreatism, oh, by the way, let me just go back. A lot of these strategies come from a paper by Murray Rothbard and comments by Stephen Davies. And I'll just bring that up quickly. I think it's on the disk. Yeah, there it is. And it contains a lot of background information on how libertarians in the distant past actually got started in the struggle for freedom. All right, now Retreatism, that's basically a do-nothing strategy. The initial libertarians, they came up with the idea, but they had no idea how to implement it. So they basically did nothing. They just withdrew from society. And Rothbard says that Lao Tzu, who was the founder of Taoism, was actually the first libertarian scholar, and this is what he did. And this is and unfortunately, a lot of people still follow that strategy today. Now, civil disobedience is another strategy which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. In this strategy, you start with a state of society, and somehow people stop supporting the state, straining its finances until it collapses. Now, this might involve withholding taxes, or it might involve doing things which increases the state's expenses. It can be a combination of those things. But this is basically what civil disobedience is. It's to cause the state to collapse because it can't support itself anymore. And Rothbard says that Etienne de la Boétie was one of the first promoters of civil disobedience. He wrote an essay, a very, very famous essay called The Discourse of Voluntary Servitude. And he never actually got a chance to implement it. He got distracted by other things, but it is the basis of civil disobedience today, as I understand it. Now, another strategy from the past is converting the monarch. The basic strategy here is you start with a state of society who doesn't have a libertarian king. And then you try to make friends with the king and talk to him about libertarianism and convince him that the free market would benefit everybody, benefit the country, and actually benefit him also. And hopefully that will take you into the next state. Here you've got a state of society. It's still a state of society, but now you've got a libertarian king. Now, hopefully, if the king is powerful enough, and now that he's a libertarian, he will use his power to transform the state. Now, this has actually been tried, and it's failed. But it was a good try, and it actually almost did succeed. I'll get into that a little bit later. Whoops. Okay, now the next strategy is politics. And this assumes a representative democracy. It's similar to converting the king, but instead of converting the king, you're trying to replace the representatives. Supposedly they are the people with the power. So you start with a state of society without libertarian representatives. The citizens, the activists, somehow manage to elect a majority of libertarian representatives to office. Once they get into office, you've got a state of society with libertarian representatives. Now the next step is for them to pass legislation that rolls back the state somehow, with repealing laws, changing laws, etc. And as you probably know, this has not been a very effective strategy except in a few cases on a very local level. Okay. Now the next strategy, also probably well known to everybody here, is the migration strategy. This is the strategy used by the Free State Project and the Free Town Project. Now, it's a little bit different from the other ones because you don't end up with a totally free society, at least not right away. What you start with is a state of society everywhere. Then libertarians move to a small chosen area. In the case of the Free State Project, it's New Hampshire. And, okay, so assuming that's successful and you have enough people who have done this, you end up with the state of society in a small area. It's mostly libertarian. Once they're there and they've settled, they can take action to transform the society into a free one by doing various things, running, for office or, whatever works. We're leaving out a lot of the details here because the details really aren't important at this point. I mean, a lot of people have preferences about the details, but we're going to leave that out for now. So what you end up with is a small free society and a larger statist one. Okay, it's not a totally free world, but at least in theory, you've got a place where you can live free. That may be a problem with that too, but anyway, that's the basic idea of the migration strategy. And by the way, that's been used a lot by groups who are not libertarians. In fact, the United States of America, you could say, was formed that way. People who were moving out of places where they were oppressed to an area where they would become the dominant population, and they were able to make the society into the one they wanted. Okay? Now the next one is agorism. Now this one, this is incomplete. I should explain something. This diagram here, it's rather complicated. It's based on Samuel L. Konkin's, or is it E. Konkin's New Libertarian Manifesto. And he, in a single chapter, described the strategy very, very well. And it goes into a lot of details. But what I didn't show, what I wanted to add, and I didn't have time to do, was the fact that it's actually a parallel strategy. He said that actually these four phases here are actually a minor part. He says you don't even need this. The important part was counter-economics and the associated education and recruitment into the counter-economic movement and activity. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to move all these over and show how there were these two other things going on at the same time. I didn't have time to do that, but try to imagine that that's what's there. Now the four phases now these four phases are he said these are things that you can do to increase the rate at which society transforms. And he said it would also be useful to protect people who were involved in the society. I think Jack went over these earlier. But basically you start with no agorists, then you've got a few, and then the next phase is to make old libertarians into new libertarians by fighting anti-principles. Okay, and then once you have a mid-density agorist society, then the next step is to sort of lay low and do things to keep the state from attacking us or attacking the agorists. Keep a low profile, things like that, while the growth is going on. Once you get to a fairly high density, at this point the state really takes notice of the movement and decides it's going to start cracking down. And at this phase, protection agencies form and they defend against the inevitable attacks, physical attacks by the state. Okay? Now, this assumes that those attacks are unsuccessful and the movement continues to grow. So you finally reach an agorist society with just a few impurities, just a few statist impurities. Oh, we got some wind here. And the last phase is just mopping up what's left of the state, and you end up with a 100% density agorist society, free society. Okay. So now those are 6 examples of libertarian strategies which have been tried or are being tried right now. All right, now let me just go quickly into composite strategies. These are ways that strategies can be combined. Okay, in sequential strategies, it's just basically a chronological sequence of things that have to be done. They have to be done in a particular order to be effective. And Konkin's strategy is one of those strategies. He had 4 phases. Okay, that's sequential strategies. Another way of putting sub-strategies together is parallel strategies. And this is what I wanted to show. This is where you have multiple things going on at the same time. And in Konkin's strategy, you had education, recruitment, and then his 4-phase sub-strategy. And very often, one of the recruitment and education are very often components of other strategies. Education is probably the most important one. In fact, it's so important, a lot of people don't even mention it. They just assume that it's happening. But it is very important, and I think it should be mentioned. In fact, I think education is one of the most important sub-strategies we have, and also where we have the most work to do and the most opportunity for improvement. And finally, the alternate strategies composite. Now, this is the case where you have multiple strategies that you could try, but it wouldn't make sense to do more than one of them at the same time. Okay, Okay, now the example I was going to give of this, and I was also going to make a diagram for this but ran out of time, is let's say you had a strategy that you called reform from within. Okay. Now you could use this structure and make a an alternate strategy by using this and making one of those branches be converting the monarch. Okay, this might be converting the monarch, and you'd follow this arrow to that sub-strategy if you lived in a country that had a king. Okay, and the other branch, assuming it's a two-branch strategy, would be politics, the conventional politics that we find here in this country. And of course, it wouldn't make sense to follow that strategy if you had a king, but it would if you had representative democracy. Okay, so that's just a very simple example of the alternate strategy structure. Okay, so let's go back. And I was going to talk about example sub-strategies, but I'm going to skip that for now because we're low on time, and it wasn't really completed anyway, so, okay.